Let's create this with a Blender Python script. A number of years ago, I was doing a challenge where I would create a Blender Python script that would generate some art for a year. So every single day, I would create a script that had to render something and I would post it on ArtStation. I was looking through those projects and I wanted to take one, simplify it, and share it with you. And this project caught my eye and I wanted to get that code and clean it up and share it with you. Now, the technique for this is not my own. I followed a tutorial from Mitch Sinayev. And so this is the tutorial I was following, and I wanted to recreate, and I used only Blender Python to achieve the same result. Okay, let's hop on into Blender and let me show you how this is done with Python. I am going to go into the scripting workspace and create a new script right here. And the code for this I'll be posting in my community, and I'll leave a link in the description. Along with that, in my community, I'll post an extended video where I'll go over how you can improve this code by making it more reusable and, for example, adding a clean scene function that will allow you to just rerun the script without having to clean it every time. All right, so the very first thing that we need to do is we need to import BPY, and this will allow Python to control Blender. Now, let me go and switch on the rendered view. And the very first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that the world background is totally black. So let's get the world object, and here's that code. So I'm getting the world and assigning it to a variable. And since it's a shader node, I'm getting the background shader and I'm modifying the color, and I'm setting that to just appear black. And let me show you how this looks in the shader editor. So instead of object, I would click on world, and this right here is what I'm changing. So I'm getting that node and updating this color. So let me run that. And as soon as I run the script, you can see that the background has changed to pitch black. And let's open the shading workspace, and you can see that it has changed. So that's basically it with this line. Next, I'm going to be setting the render engine to cycles. You could use Eevee for this. I just prefer cycles for this particular piece. Let me move myself up here. And so in the render settings, I'm going to be setting this. So I'm going to be also setting the GPU device, the device to GPU. If you don't have this, then just don't set this line. And I'm setting the samples to 300. Let me run the script. Now the render engine changed to cycles. We got our device set to GPU, and if we scroll down, the render is now max samples at 300. All right. Next, I want to set the resolution. So if we go into the output, and the resolution is 1920 by 1080, and I just want to make this a square render, and I'm just going to update the X. I'm also updating the Y, but you probably can just skip that. So let me run that. And you can see nothing really changed except the resolution on the X. Okay, next we are going to be setting the camera, or adding the camera, sorry. So let me update this. And we're adding a new object, which is the camera. I'm setting the location at -11 on the X, and then I'm setting a rotation so it's like facing a particular direction. I'm using the math module, so I need to import it at the top. Math. So for this to work, I need to import math, and I need to get the radians of 90 degrees because Blender is expecting the rotations to be in radians. So I need to convert my degrees into radians, and this is what it's doing. So I'm doing 90-degree rotation on the X, and then -90 on the Z axis. And I'm getting the currently active object. It's the one that is that was just added, and I'm updating the lens of the camera, and I'm making the camera the main camera of the scene. Let's run this, and you can see that the camera was added. I'll hit 0 on my numpad, and we don't have a light, so you don't see anything. Let me update to the shading. Yeah, so you can see it's like pointing at the cube right now. So yeah, that's the camera, and you can see the resolution is a square. And the 70, the lens, the focal length is this right here. So I'm setting the focal length with this, and that's about it for this part of the script. Okay, let me just clear the scene by hitting AX and then delete. We're just going to be rerunning this over and over again, and I'm going to be just deleting stuff. Now, it's possible to clear the scene with a script, and I'll explain that in the extended video. But for now, I'm just going to be doing it by hand. Okay, let's create a backdrop. So we'll have a backdrop here, and again, it's totally not fitting on my screen, like that. Okay, so it's just a plane with size 20 and the location of 5 on the X, and it's rotated 90 degrees on the Y. So let me run that. So you can see that the camera is pointed at our backdrop right here. And to get this full view, I hit Control Space. Okay, so that is that. And let's add a light. And the light is pretty straightforward, similar to what we have with the plane. I'm adding an area light. Location is 5 on the Z-axis, and I'm giving it a power of 100. Let's clear the scene, run that, and you can see that we have the light there. I think you could see something in the rendered view. Yeah, you can see that there is like the backdrop is now lit. All right. Okay, next we're going to be creating the emitter, and this is the code for that. I'm using a curve circle with a radius of 1, and I'm rotating on the Y by 90 degrees. I'm getting the currently active object. I'm setting a bevel depth and extruding it, and then I'm making sure that it's not visible in the render. So we only want to see the hair, that's the particle hair that's getting rendered. And then I'm converting all that into a mesh. So I'm converting that object into a mesh. Let's run that. So delete everything. Run that. Actually, you know what? Before I'll show you, before I convert it into a mesh. So here is that object. And let's go into the curve properties. So geometry. So the bevel depth is this right here. So I'm setting that. And then the extrude, I'm setting this, right? So extrude is making it like wider, right? And the depth is, you could see that it's getting like thicker, right? So that's the depth. And so that's set by these two lines. And let's see here if I could see this. So that is that. And let's convert that into a mesh and then rerun it. And now this is a mesh. Okay, now let's create the particle system. And here's the code for the particle system. I'm just creating a particle. I'm adding a particle system to the currently active object. I am getting the particle system settings, setting the type of the particle system to hair. Making the emitter count. I'm setting the emitter count to 10,000. The hair length to 2. The number of steps to 6. Display steps, render steps. So that is set. Let's delete everything, rerun it. Let's open the particle settings. That's the number of particles right here. So that's the length, that's the segments. So yeah. And in the render, here's the steps as well. Okay, so if we take a look at this, you can see that the hair is just, since it's a mesh and it's like going around, you can see that the hair is kind of pointing every which way. It's pretty cool. Let's see, it's pretty even, like you can see patterns. Maybe this could be also something to experiment with, but yeah, so that's that. But the main cool thing about the technique that Midge did was using a turbulence force field to make that hair kind of go wild and everywhere. And let's add that force field next. Let's clear that, run that code, and now there's an issue here because see, like the particle system is messed up, and it's messed up because because I'm creating the particle system each time, we have an extra particle system, and I'm actually getting the old particle system with this. When I create this Blender adds like particle system settings like 0.001. So to fix this, let me actually show you. So you can see the particle settings is that and not this, and that's the problem here, that we're not actually changing this anymore. And to fix that, and since we deleted the previous setup, I need to purge the I need to clean up and purge the unused data. So that data is still around, right? So let me clear that, delete this, and now rerun it. And now you can see that we have what we want to see, right? And one thing that we could fix this with a single line at the very top. So after we delete everything, I'm gonna run a command that's called I'm gonna run a command at the very top of the script to purge orphan data. So here's that command. So it's the purge orphans, and then I want to run it with the following arguments that make sure that it's recursively deleting all the data that is linked. Don't worry about this if you're not sure what this is doing. So Blender doesn't really delete the objects that you have in your scene. It still has those that data blocks in its memory until you reboot Blender. And let's just check it. I'm gonna delete everything again, run that again, and you can see now our script is working as expected. Okay, let's go at the very to the very bottom again. So we've stopped on the force field creation. So we're adding an effector and then making it a type of a turbulence. Setting the location of it here doesn't really matter. You could play around with this value. Setting the strength to 25. Again, you could also play around with this. And let's see. So that is what the camera is currently seeing. And at this point, it's pretty already interesting. You could maybe even pause at this point if you like what you're seeing. The next part of this video is going to be creating the material using Python. If you're enjoying this video and learning something new, make sure to hit the like button. I'll really appreciate it. And the next part of the video, we're going to be creating a material that highlights some of these strands using a color ramp. So let's do that. Okay, just to work on the material, let's actually switch to the shading workspace. And let me create a editor here. So that's the code that we're working on, and it'll allow us to see what's going on with that. So it'll allow us to see what's going on with material. Okay, I've added the code that creates the material, and let's go over it step by step to kind of break it down what's going on. At the very top, I'm setting two variables that are going to control the strength of the emission and the color of the emission. And these are the places. These are the two places in the code that I would highly recommend you checking out the code and playing around with this part, because it's going to change the way that the end result will look. So next, we're creating the material, calling it hair strand glow material. Could be anything. We're making sure that we're using nodes. And we're getting the node tree of the material. Next, we're actually just purging and removing all the nodes from that tree, and we're starting to add the nodes into that material. So let me actually run this code, and if I assign that material by hand, you can see that it's already doing what we want. So it's highlighting some of these strands. And let's take a closer look at the node graph itself. Oops. So the setup is pretty straightforward if you have worked with shader nodes in Blender before. If you haven't, don't worry. The basic material that you usually create, let's actually do that. Let me show you how that looks. Let's go. Let's create a basic material. New. So this is the basic material that when you add a material into the a mesh, you have the principal BSDF and the output, and that's it. So to this basic setup, we are adding these three nodes right here. We're plugging in all of this into the color and the strength, the emission strength. So we're getting the curve info and getting a random value out of that, And then we're using the color ramp to select only a small part of the strands. And then we're using the multiply. You could actually skip this, but we're using this to control the strength of the emission. So without this, we won't be able to kind of control how strong that emission is. And that is pretty much it. You could also control the colors, the color of the strands, the ones that are not glowing, with setting this base color. And let's take a look at what's actually how this is done with Python. So we're creating the material here, making sure that this use nodes is set with that. We're clearing all the nodes, and we're starting with the hair info shader node, which is this thing right here. Next, we're tracking the current location of the node. So each node has an X, Y, Z coordinate location on that in the node graph, and I'm using a variable to track that location. So this node is located at 0, 0 on this node graph. Next, we're creating the value to RGB, which is the AKA color ramp. So this node right here. I'm setting this to constant, so I want the interpolation to be a constant. Next, we're setting the location, so I've updated the location to 300 units, and that's where I'm setting that, and I'm just updating that location again, so for the next node that's going to be using this, it's going to be nicely spread out. Next, I'm getting the second element, even though it says first, since the indexing of elements in Python start with 0, so you got 0, 1, right? So second element. We're dragging this right here to slightly to the left. I think originally they're both at the very edge. I think that both of the stops are usually on the sides, right? And I'm just slightly moving it to right here, so you can see that it's slightly modified. So you can see the position is that. So this is set with this. Next, we have the math node, which is not the vector math, it's just the math node. So this one right here, math. So that thing right here, right? And I'm just setting this to multiply, right? Okay. So setting that to multiply, setting that to the emission strength. So remember the variable we defined above, which is set to 20. So this thing right here. So I am setting the strength to the value, and this could be, so this input is actually, so this is the inputs, and the inputs to this node are the value and the first value and the second value. And I'm just using the second socket in this way, similar to what we're doing here, right? Using the second element or second stop. So I'm using the second input, setting the default value to that to the emission strength. Next, we're creating the principal BSDF because we deleted it a couple of lines above. So when we're deleting all the nodes, so we need to recreate that. We need to set the location again. We're using that current node location, updating that. And here I'm checking if we actually are setting, like for example, you can just skip this and set this to none right here if you don't want any color, right? But I'll keep that set to red. So and the color is RGBA, right? So red is set to 1, 0, 0 for green and blue, and then alpha for 1. And we're setting the emission color. So emission color, default value, emission color, which is that variable, right? This variable right here. And we're adding the material output and setting the location as well. And now, as you notice, we didn't do any connections, and now we need to add the links. So the links are kind of separate. So we got the nodes, and then we have the links. And the links are set the following way. So we're connecting all these BSDF to surface, a value to strength, so value to emission strength, color from color ramp into value of the multiply math node. Then we have the random to fac right here, right? So pretty straightforward, right? Now, the final thing that we need to do here is assign that material to our emitter. And to do that, we're just getting the reference to the emitter object, and in the list of materials, we're appending to that list this material. So we have a variable that represents the material, and we're using that here to append that to the list. Okay, let's clear the scene, run this, and now let's take a look. Press Z on the keyboard, set rendered, and you can see that we have this. All right, if you want to grab the code for this project, I'll be posting that code in my community. I'll leave a link in the description. Also, I'll be posting a video that's going to improve this code and make it more reusable. So if you're interested in that, I'll be posting that as well in the community. And if you're hungry for more projects like this that generate art with a Python script, check out this video next.